You found us. We are the Brattlecast, the podcast that emanates from the fabulous Brattle bookshop in Boston on West Street, right downtown. It's been an institution here for decades and decades and will be for many more to come. And I'm happy, Jordan Rich, to be sitting with my good friend Ken Gloss from the bookstore and the guy who puts it all together and comes in with amazing stories and articles and things to show us. Now, the last time we spoke, we talked about a Walt Whitman letter written in 1864, I believe.
Yes.
Regarding the troops in hospital and his thanking someone for a donation and all that. And there was a slight caveat that we mentioned another famous name in those days, Ralph Waldo Emerson. So this podcast is more dedicated to Ralph. Let's talk about what we're going to go for.
Oh, well, I don't always. I sometimes say Mr. Emerson, but
Mr. Emerson.
It depends on how personal I want to
all right.
be. Again, one of the fun parts about the business is finding things, is going out and looking. And one of the great parts about being in New England is Ralph Waldo Emerson was from New England. And not only is he from New England, but he has lots and lots of relatives who are still around. And some of those attics, that things have been up in the attic for 200 years or more, in some cases 150. Every once in a while, a few make their way down out of the attic. I get a call, or sometimes it's universities and so on, and you get called in. And a lady who, I don't know if she was related or one of her friends or whatever, had a few letters of some famous people, and some were Ralph Waldo Emerson. And when I first started, there were about 4 or 5 letters. One I mentioned in the last podcast. Mm-hmm. A couple of the letters were, he was getting married in the 1830s, I believe it was, and his wife had a house in Plymouth, but he had a house in Concord, which is where you really think of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau and all of that literary movement, the Transcendentalists sort of coming along. But they wanted to sell the house in Plymouth. They didn't need 2 houses. So I got a couple of letters that were just talking about fairly mundane. Do you think you can get this price? Can you get that price? This person's willing to pay that. This person's willing to pay whatever. And eventually he was thanking someone, saying, we got a good price. We're very happy. Let's get this done. But there was one letter that was obviously to a young girl. I don't know exactly what her last name was, but it was done in 1835, March. And no one can see this on the podcast, but I have a typewritten script of it, single-spaced. Okay. And he starts off, Lucia, I am afraid you think me very ungrateful for the good letter which I begged for, and which was so long in coming to me, or that I am malicious and mean to make you wait as long for an answer. But to tell you the truth, I have had as many composition lessons set me lately that I am sure that no scholar or Mr. Moore has years less spare time. Otherwise, I should have written instantly, for I have an immense curiosity for Plymouth news and have a great regard for your young correspondent. So he's writing to a young girl. Mm-hmm. Then I'll skip ahead a little. For though I know very well that Lucia is the happiest of girls in having her sister so wise and so kind a guide, yet even her aid must stop when she has put the book before her. You neither sister nor brother nor mother nor father can think for us. In the little private chapel of your mind, none but God and you can see the happy thoughts that follow each other. And then he goes on to talk about, have you found out that nature is always talking to you, especially when you are alone, though she may have not the gift of articulate, in any case, I'm not great at reading letters, but nature will talk to you, though she has not the gift of articulate speech. Have you found out what that great old gray ocean that is always in your sight says, listen, and what that withered leaves that in chatter in the cold March wind, only listen. And he's talking about the sounds of nature, how only
His philosophy,
only you and God can hear this, and you have to listen to it. And one of the great things about this letter, it was in 1835, and it goes on more, and I won't read a lot more of it, but in the next year he came out with one of his first great books called Nature. Now, one of the things that I haven't had, I've only had these letters a few weeks, and quite honestly, we've been moving thousands and thousands of books. I haven't had time to look up everything and to do all the research, but what I'm very eager to do, to look at the book Nature and see if these lines about talking with nature, listening to nature, how close, wondering if this letter was maybe a test case for some of the writing he put in one of his great books.
You know what impresses me about that is the fact that he's so kind to a young person. I don't know the circumstances, obviously, but it's his kindliness and respect for her and admiration for her and advice to her is really pretty special.
Well, and it's pretty obvious that he wants her and young people in general, but others, to appreciate the nature, what he's trying to teach people, what he's trying to get people to think of. And again, even apologizing profusely for not writing back immediately. I mean, he was getting to be well known by then.
So in those days, if you were a fan of somebody like Ralph Waldo Emerson or Charles Dickens or anybody, you would write them a fan letter, perhaps, or
Absolutely.
And that's what he's probably responding to, a correspondence like that.
Yeah, it would be hard to get on your iPhone and call him.
Instagram wasn't.
He might not have had his phone with him or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, that's definitely how you would do it. And there's only so much time in a day that he could write. And like I say, I haven't done the research yet, but this is a long letter. And he really expresses thoughts that he's obviously thought about and been very conscious about, and trying to give a lot of his philosophy even to a young girl. And so I want to see, and one of my fun things will be when I eventually sit down and do this, is how much of this letter went into those writings or future writings, or how much did he refine it, or how much did he maybe edit or change. And that's one of the things that makes this letter, in my opinion, great. Now,
can you describe the letter itself? I mean, I think that's important for the listener.
The letter itself, I wish it was in a little better condition. It's not in bad shape. But a lot of times when letters were sent in those days, they were on essentially single sheets of paper that got folded a number of times and then written on. Paper was expensive. It wasn't you didn't just get reams and reams of paper. And then it would get folded in such a way that the address would be on the front with the letter inside. And usually it would either have a seal or some glue holding it closed. Well, you can see where that seal was on this letter, because that obviously tore away a little. Now, the other thing about the letter is obviously folded and unfolded a number of times, and it must have at one point been coming apart. And please, if anyone has letters, if you have anything, Scotch tape is about the worst thing you can put on a letter.
I'm looking at that, and it bespeaks something very ugly.
All the folds. But the great part about it is that you can still see all the words. You didn't lose any of the text. Matter of fact, since I do have
I'm going to just take a quick peek.
Since I do have a copy of it written, it's fine. But what I also tell people nowadays when they have old letters like this is get a digital copy, so that when all the family and friends want to read it, they can read the copy, and then the original can be away, safe, not handled, not touched, not torn, not ripped.
I love looking at penmanship the way it was supposed to be. And the thing that strikes me in a letter like this, or any of these literary figures, is It's longhand, so you're thinking and writing longhand as opposed to using a word processor or a computer. We forget that this was very deliberate and very articulate in its present state.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was before the typewriter, which was the late 1800s.
That's right, exactly.
And now another thing that you run into with old letters, and this isn't an example, but because paper was so short and so scarce, now these letters, these sentences are written out line by line. His penmanship is great. Sometimes old letters are hard to read because the penmanship isn't quite great, or the diction, the context, the words they use, you're not quite sure because you're not used to using them. But especially in some letters, they ran out of paper. So what they would do is they would write sentences sideways over the other and essentially cross-writing.
Wow.
And with care, you can actually read and understand those letters.
Waste not, want not.
But, well, exactly. But like I say, again, having a letter of Emerson's, having him actually put thoughts down. Now, the first letter where he's talking about the real estate sales and so on, that's interesting. It's nice. It probably, adds to the history of his life and a biography. But having him put down his thoughts and philosophy and nature, and also just you can really feel his personality come out in this letter. And again, to this young girl, and it's a lot of fun. And just the idea. Actually, after I got this, one day I live in downtown Boston. I was sitting on the Charles River, and I was actually trying to just stop and listen to the nature.
Right.
And Storrow Drive is behind this, so you have to block that out a little. But that's part of our nature. But you can hear the boats, people in kayaks, or a few of the crews in their sculls were going by.
Sure.
You hear that, and then the geese,
the seagulls, the geese, and all that.
Yeah, and I did it just for a few minutes, and it was so relaxing, and it was sort of that inspired me to do that. Maybe I don't do it enough, but in any case, it's fun. And that's one of the things that, again, I really enjoy. It's getting something that I haven't seen before, because many times you go to people's libraries, you buy the books. Even without being able to read the titles, I can across the room say, oh, that's a copy of, and that's a copy of, because I've seen them before.
Right.
Whereas when you get letters, especially of well-written, well-known people, each one of is a different thing.
Very special indeed. All part of what comprises the Brattle Bookshop in so many levels and so many different divisions of interest and history and love and lore. Thank you, my friend, as always. It's great to share these stories with us here and also with all the customers who come in the store and all the people you talk to.
Well, also, Jordan, I'll say at the beginning, you said that I bring in and have these stories. But being here, you enable me to get these out there in a form that people can listen to them. So it's a mutual.
It's eavesdropping at its finest, and I know people love to do that. Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Brattlecast. Have a great day.